Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and build a framework to help us actually understand the chaotic, constantly shifting headlines of world affairs. I mean, if you've ever opened your morning news app and felt just utterly overwhelmed, like you're watching this massive chess game where someone keeps randomly changing the rules, trust me, you are absolutely not alone. So today we're taking a structured approach to decode all these crazy international dynamics. We're going to draw directly from foundational sources on geopolitics to figure out exactly what is really going on out there. But before we jump into the complex theories, we really have to ask ourselves a truly fundamental question. Why do states go to war? Seriously, what is the primal drive behind global conflicts and state survival? For centuries, human societies have clashed over resources, power, and these deep-rooted historical grievances. Understanding that primal engine of conflict, well, that's our very first step to making sense of the whole international arena. To break this all down, we'll cover 5 main areas: making sense of global chaos, the rules of the game, alliances and global order, the human element, and finally, tomorrow's geopolitical battlegrounds. Let's get into it. Kicking things off with part 1, making sense of global chaos and finding structure in a complex, multipolar world. It is truly fascinating how our source material links the clinical, psychological pathology of xenophobia directly to global instability. Instead of just looking at conflict as some calculated political maneuver, the text defines it clinically. It suggests that this non-adaptive anxiety acts almost like a virus. It mutates, right? It scales up from individual bias, spreads to societal and international levels, and ultimately fuels the deadly ethnic and nationalistic conflicts we've seen surging since the end of the Cold War. So, zooming out from the psychological, we hit the cultural side of things. These deep-rooted differences in culture, religion, and values, they explain exactly why a one-size-fits-all view of globalization just completely fails. The sources really emphasize that cultural cognition fundamentally shapes how a state behaves. Think of it this way. Different societies aren't just reading from different pages of the same book, they're reading entirely different books. They often completely disagree on what global events even mean in the first place. Moving right along to part 2, the rules of the game. We'll be looking at the frameworks of international relations. Now, international relations is constantly wrestling with this massive fundamental dichotomy. On one side, you've got realism. This is your harsh, zero-sum game where states operate in a totally anarchic world. It is all about self-interest, strict security, and coercive military power. Honestly, a truly dog-eat-dog environment. But then, on the flip side, you have idealism. Idealism argues that, hey, we aren't doomed to constant conflict. It proposes that states can actually maintain peace through ethical norms, international law, and regulating authorities. It's this endless tug-of-war between raw power and cooperative principles. But power isn't just about militaries anymore. Far from it. In the modern era, economic statecraft has become a weapon just as potent as any traditional army. We call this geoeconomics. States are now fiercely competing over currency arrangements, global supply chains, and technological interdependence. And listen, this matters to you directly. This is the exact reason why a distant trade tariff, a blocked shipping lane, or a random microchip shortage can hike up your gas prices or empty your local store shelves just as effectively as a military standoff. Crazy, right? Even with all this modern strategy, things are still deeply rooted in classical physical geography. Take Halford Minder's Heartland theory. He argued that controlling the resource-rich Eurasian core, what he called the world island, is the absolute key to global domination. But then Nicholas Spikeman countered this with his Rimland theory, basically arguing, no, true power actually lies in controlling the coastal fringes of Europe and Asia. It's this eternal strategic struggle between massive, unmovable land powers and agile sea powers. It's literally playing out like an epic, real-world game of Risk. All right, into part 3, alliances and global order. This is all about how states team up to survive. When states team up, it's wild because historic adversaries can actually become partners. Take the EU, for example. It's a prime example of nations successfully pooling their sovereignty to build economic trust after 2 devastating world wars. Then you have NATO, which really ameliorated the security dilemma in Western Europe, though, as we've seen, its continued expansion has inevitably created anti-alliance pushback from other regions. And of course, the UN. The United Nations has dramatically shifted from neutral, traditional peacekeeping into much more complex and sometimes overtly coercive global interventions. Now, if we look at regional arenas like Asia, major powers are deploying completely different playbooks to compete for influence. Japan, they rely heavily on their longstanding normative and economic influence. China promotes a strategy of a peaceful rise, which is heavily focused on economic engagement and the absolute value of state sovereignty. Meanwhile, the United States focuses on preserving the multilateral order, frequently utilizing economic sanctions and coercive diplomacy. It's just a fascinating real-time display of these distinct geopolitical theories in action. Let's zoom in a bit for part 4, the human element. We're talking rights, revolutions, and the people. The adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was the moral equivalent of an emphatic Declaration of Independence. I love that powerful idea from the text because it highlights a true turning point in world affairs. When the UN adopted this declaration back in 1948, right at the dawn of the Cold War, it literally gave citizens worldwide the ideological ammunition to challenge tyranny. It established once and for all that basic human rights transcend state borders, and that changed the dynamic between governments and the governed forever. But here's the thing. Human rights aren't exactly a one-size-fits-all reality. The data shows a really fascinating divergence in how these universal rights are practically supported across the globe. Surveys reveal the highest explicit support for political participation is in the global north, in nations like Norway and Denmark. In sharp contrast, in the global south and parts of Asia, the source notes varying interpretations of human rights enforcement. These are often deeply shaped by a nation's specific economic priorities or cultural traditions. It just proves that global norms are rarely applied uniformly. And what happens when these rights are ignored or economies fail? Well, the people react. Tracing these movements over time proves that the demand for democracy is this constant, unstoppable historical force. I mean, it was there during the anti-war protests that brought down the German Empire in 1918. It drove a peaceful military coup to overthrow fascism in Portugal in 1974. And it ignited the Arab Spring in 2010, which was sparked by crushing youth unemployment and corruption. These revolutions, they aren't just dry political theories. They're born from regular people reaching an absolute breaking point. Finally, let's look ahead to part 5. Tomorrow's geopolitical battlegrounds, and the disruptors actively rewriting the rules. Despite the incredible optimism for global democracy we saw back in the 1990s, the sources outline several pessimistic trends threatening stability today. We're seeing the rise of electoral authoritarianism, where the illusion of democratic elections is basically masking increasingly sophisticated dictatorships. There are also warnings of potential new Cold Wars, drawn not by ideology this time, but by civilizational lines. Combined with growing economic inequality, guys, these aren't just distant academic concepts. These are active tectonic shifts happening in the background of our daily news feeds right now. And technology acts as a massive accelerant to all this friction. Think about social media. It was once hailed as the ultimate democratizer, but it's increasingly trapping us in algorithmically generated echo chambers. By exposing users only to information that confirms their existing biases, populations are becoming ideologically isolated. It completely fragments societies from the inside out, making international and even domestic consensus incredibly difficult to achieve. And speaking of technology, the battleground itself has fully digitized. While we're over here worrying about physical borders, the real battles are happening silently on servers every single second of the day. Cybersecurity is now a foundational pillar of national security. Honestly, it's just as critical as food or energy at this point. State and non-state actors are continuously vying for regime control and data supremacy. This locks states into a permanent, hidden framework of conflict long before any physical shots are ever fired. Add to all of that the ultimate threat multiplier, climate change. The source material emphasizes that this is going to act as the ultimate geopolitical stress test. Driven by fossil fuels and human activity, this isn't just an environmental issue anymore. It is a critical security issue. As extreme weather devastates settlements and destroys arable land, it's going to displace massive populations. And unfortunately, that's going to spark desperate, violent conflicts over dwindling basic resources. Which brings us to the end of our framework. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Considering the rise of new economic powers, the invisible reality of cyber warfare, and the impending stress of a changing climate, are our current international alliances really prepared for the unprecedented complexities of the 21st century? Or are we just playing a brand new game with an old set of rules? Thanks so much for exploring geopolitics with me today. Keep questioning those headlines and keep learning.